how can you start to make better decisions in life? If you're like most people, it's probably not a question you've ever even asked yourself. Yet every action you take and every aspect of your life is either directly or indirectly a result of some decision you made down the line. Maybe you're a pretty level-headed person and you tend to make the right decision more often than not. But everyone gets thrown off at times. Events happen, emotions run high, stress overflows. So how do you make sure you're making the right choice when the stakes are high? Welcome to Change Made Easy. Changing your habits, routines, and behaviors is hard. We make it easy. I'm Paul Leviton, and I help high achievers just like you who feel stuck bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Traditional self-help doesn't work. It's either too rigid, too generic, or too overwhelming. My approach is different. I simplify change by making it so easy it can't not happen. Using my easier framework, I'll help you create habits, routines, and behaviors that stick for good, so you can stop struggling and start thriving. It's that easy. Today, we're talking behavior change and decision making with an expert who deeply understands what it takes to excel at the highest levels. Chris Sparks spent his early 20s as one of the top professional poker players in the world, competing for millions of dollars at the highest levels. After retiring from poker, he used the skills he learned as a competitive poker player to create his own frameworks around achieving elite performance both in business and in life that he now teaches to executives and investors through his concierge coaching company, Forcing Function. Chris is a good friend of mine, and we've had many conversations about life and philosophy and things that would have been great for a podcast, but we never got recorded. So I'm so excited that I was able to set this up so you can better hear how someone who has succeeded in the highest, most pressure-filled arenas of life thinks and makes decisions. In this episode, Chris and I discuss why the same conflicts show up in different areas across your life and even relationships, what emotional triggers reveal about you, and what we should do about them, and a simple but powerful shift that can change how you show up in difficult moments. This conversation isn't about tactics or decision-making rules. It's about understanding the patterns underneath your behaviors and your reactions, and how awareness can change what's often automatic to something that's a conscious decision. If you've ever felt like your decisions are making you rather than the other way around, this episode will help you take back control. And with that, please enjoy this conversation with Chris Sparks. How do we start to make better decisions under pressure?
Well, I would always break those down. First, how do we make decisions? And then let's worry about the pressure later. With decisions, the big thing that I try to emphasize is that decisions are a process. It's typical to overfixate on outcomes, and that can get us into results-oriented thinking. But if we treat our decision-making as a process, as it's a product that we continually iterate over time, that we learn more about what works for us in our own decision-making, what are the types of decisions that make us feel aligned, that we're proud of later? What are the things to pay attention to? What are the signals that we might underweight or ignore? These are all factors, and it allows us to play the long game where no particular decision matters all that much, but each decision feeds into making better and better, more aligned decisions over time. So starting with that mindset is a good place. And then the under pressure part, once you have that process orientation, it's a lot more, resolute or robust to that pressure because you're operating with a framework. When you don't have a framework that is guiding your decision making, a lot more susceptible to bias and emotion and inconsistency of the situation that you're facing. It's not that we try to eliminate emotion from our decisions. In fact, the opposite. But we're trying to create something that has some objectivity. So it allows us to see afterwards, independent of outcomes, what are the aspects of this process that we want to amplify and what are the aspects that we might not do again next time.
Great answer. And there's a lot of different threads that I want to pull on there. You mentioned that we're not trying to actually be devoid of emotion. And it's interesting. Right before we got on this call to record, I actually read a quote that I wrote down that I wanted to read to you. And it says, "You don't react to situations, you react to the emotions those situations trigger." And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
And it makes me think of a Hoffman Process quote, which is never waste a good trigger. So when you feel something is amplified in terms of your emotional response, it's usually because it's scratching on some deeper wound. So that the trigger is an opportunity to see what is that part of ourselves that we're favoring that has an outsized voice, usually some sort of protectionistic mechanism. This is something that I have very much changed my mind and perspective on over the years, is that I think emotions have very valuable signals for us. And that if we try to dampen, diminish, repress those signals, they tend to leak out in insidious ways anyway. So it's a bit hopeless to try to repress them. So being able to listen to what these emotions or subparts are trying to communicate to us, not only can we hear that message, but usually the emotion will dissipate. We won't feel it as strongly. It's like we're turning down the volume. So, if we can talk about any emotion, right? Anger, for example, maybe this means that one of our boundaries has been infringed upon. And that's very good at information for a decision. If we're feeling, let's say, some guilt, this is perhaps a signal that we've acted out of alignment or integrity. And that's something to examine. Is this something we should repeat? So it's not that these emotions are everything or nothing. They're just another signal that we try to take into account, and any decision which has many factors at play.
Yeah, it's a great point, and really all decisions probably have many factors at play. And I love the distinction that emotion, like anything else, is it's just data. Something that I talk about a lot on here is that having the mindset of a scientist, and it's just everything is an experiment, everything is data, everything is feedback. And you've mentioned a few times the word alignment, and if this makes us feel more or less aligned. But obviously, the caveat to that is you have to know in alignment with what, and you have to know where you're going to even have that sense. So, kind of backtracking a little bit, because I do think that this is an issue that so many people deal with, is it's hard to get where you're going when you don't know what that destination is, and then we end up spinning our wheels in the mud. So, where do we start if we've never thought that through? If I don't know what is in alignment with me, because it's not a word that's in my vocabulary right now. Like, how do you start people on that path?
One question that I like is when this was going really well for you in the past, well, what did that look like? A lot of my conversations have to do with productivity and performance. So, how are we showing up? What are we achieving on a regular basis? So, if we're trying to improve on those vectors, let's start with what do we already know works? What have we seen work in the past? Are there things that you were doing when things were going really well that you aren't doing now? Or the things that you weren't doing that you are doing now? Those are always good places to start. The classic saying, it's easiest to steer a moving ship. If you don't know which direction to go, well, let's run some experiments. Things that are quick and cheap, but can start to give us a sense for what progress feels like. And if that progress feels like it's directionally correct, we can always double down. So, That's the first answer is how do we get some form of movement, even if it's more or less random. The best place to start are the things that we already know work for us. Let's build on that foundation. And then the other side of that is working backwards. So if we have a vision, a picture of what we want our career, our life to look like in X amount of time, maybe there's a lot of pieces missing from that puzzle. But let's start with the edges. Is there anything that comes through? Whether this could be if you imagine it as if you're, imagining a story, or, let's do a brainstorm where we just list out things that could be fun or things that feel fulfilling or things that indicate that I was successful, right? Whatever those keywords are. We start to fill in those edges, then we have something to work with, and then we can build in from there.
You know, before you started talking just now, you paused, and every time that I've asked a question so far, you've taken a deep breath and contemplated. And this is something that stands out to me because I've talked to hundreds of people on the other side of a podcast or in coaching conversations or a million different ways. And very rarely do people slow down to think about what they're saying or to give that space to breathe, which can even feel awkward in a sense. And I'm curious if that's a skill that you've built, or is that how you've always been? Did that come naturally to you?
Absolutely not. I think I very much led. So, just for quick background context, I've been an executive coach for 10 years now. I taught other professional poker players for 5 years before that. So, I've always enjoyed teaching and sharing knowledge. And I think my bias when I started this was if this person I'm talking to knew what I knew, the next move would be obvious. And as anyone who's tried to convince a significant other of doing something, whether this is a spouse or a child, telling someone what to do tends not to work very well, and sometimes has the opposite effect. So I've been progressively humbled over the years, and that despite the more that I learn, the less that I truly know. And in that way, knowing is the enemy of change because it gets us nice and comfortable and less open to feedback. I think especially today, being adaptable is potentially the most important thing we can be. But I digress. Partially, this might be supplemented. I've been developing my meditation practice over the years. Buddhism's been a large influence on me, and that's very much grounded in non-knowledge and allowing the space that a lot of our suffering, a lot of our striving is driven by our fear of space. And yeah, having done these interviews before, I also know my tendency to just try to regurgitate a bunch of things that I've learned. Try to compress the sum of my knowledge into a 30-minute conversation, which is not going to work. So there's a bit element of trust in you, Paul, that you'll guide us where we need to go, and trust in myself that without needing to plan, the right thing will come through.
Yeah, I mean, and the reason I bring that up for people listening, or just anyone who thinks that's a weird tangent, it's being able to pause and give time and space is such a powerful tool. And I've coached people in so many different areas of, fitness coaching, health coaching, nutrition coaching, but also business coaching, also relationships, all of these things. And it's like every one of those things, the very first thing that I work with people on is pausing and slowing down. So I appreciate how you've cultivated that. And it's surely come through, your experience in poker as an executive coach. But I'm interested, you mentioned there talking to a significant other. I'm curious, how has your work that you've done professionally affected your relationship with your spouse? Is there anything that you've learned as a coach or as a poker player that you've brought into your relationship, or vice versa, something that you've had to learn to be a better partner that's helped you in your professional pursuits?
Given the curveballs today. Yes, certainly. I think being in a important relationship, like a romantic relationship, is a continuous mirror. It can be a real growth accelerant. A couple things that come to mind. First, I think the the foundation of any successful relationship, romantic or otherwise, is respect and listening. So respect that the other person is acting faithfully, that they have your best interests at heart, and listening, which is being there for them, being open to what they have to say, being open to having your mind changed, and really trying to understand where they're coming from. It feels like many heated conversations are grounded in people who are talking past each other, who aren't truly listening. And if they were to mirror back what they had heard, the two people are essentially having two different conversations. So that's always the advice that I give. Also, if you choose wisely and choose daily. If you pick the wrong person, no amount of principles or advice is going to save. If you pick the right person, that's a real start, right? That they'll tend to reinforce the best aspects of yourself. Thinking of like the equilibrium as a place that you guys both want to be, the natural resting place. Lessons from poker for relationships. In poker, people are continuously telling you what they want and who they are. So again, I guess it comes back to listening. There's a large self-awareness aspect of poker. We talked about triggers, when noticing the triggers and not shying away from them, because that's where all the gold is. I think that's true when you're trying to make a read of an opponent, and that's true when you're prioritizing a relationship. Yeah, prioritizing brings up something as well. Is when you move into a romantic relationship, for context, we've been together for 11 years, married for 4. You just start to refer to things in we and us terms instead of I. So having that shared vision, it comes back to alignment. And yeah, when you think in those terms, a lot of things that I once thought were important maybe fall to the wayside, and other things emerge in their place. So, just being open to the process of being changed by another person, which can only happen in those conditions of respect.
Yeah, I love that, and I appreciate you sharing all that. It's one, everything you said is so true, and this is what I love about this podcast, and this is kind of always my thing with everyone that I talk to in this realm, is like what pulling on that, what I call the golden thread, and it's like that runs through all of these things, because somehow poker, entrepreneurship, relationships all have the same golden thread. And like you just said, curiosity, respect, being open to lean into the discomfort, and all of these things. So it's like they don't, on surface, all of these things don't sound like they have anything to do with each other, but what we find is that success is success is success, right? And as they say, success leaves clues. So for someone like you who's been successful in many different realms, again, different, but in reality, all kind of the same. And now you have a business where you literally help other people, specifically entrepreneurs, CEOs, high achievers, become as successful as possible. What are some of the defining factors that you see as differences between the people who say get it and those who don't, right? Like just the I don't want to say like be mean, but the winners and the losers, the cream of the crop, and everyone else, right? Like there's, when you meet someone or talk with someone, like what's something that you can see that it's like this person has the right mentality, the right mindset, or this person is going in the wrong direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think those are potentially two different questions. So I might try to address both. First I would talk about what are the things I'm looking for in an initial conversation, that this could be a fit, someone that I'm working with, as in, do I believe in their ability to get value from this, to create the change that they're looking for. The biggest thing, of course, is buy-in. Right? If someone isn't bought into the process, that's if they're doing a regression, maybe that's 60 or 70% of outcomes from a coaching relationship is how much the client is bought in. And so you can see that, and are they taking action? What have they tried? How are they creating space for this in their life? What brings them to this conversation? What's the why behind it? All of those things feed into, essentially, are they willing to do the work necessary to realize the value from insight? You picture pigs at a trough, like the world is just one endless trough of insight. Are they here to just get their snout wet, or do they really want to, take this farm to the next level? Never used that one before, but I like it. The other one is self-awareness. I think this is perhaps the speed limit for any change. Is, are we willing to look at the parts of ourselves that maybe we're not so proud of? A lot of this work comes down to, there's something that I know works or could work, but I'm not doing it. And the classic self sabotage, procrastination, all those types of patterns, where my basic belief is everything we're doing is serving us in some way, but that misalignment is where we're maybe not getting the net benefit. All right, we're getting benefits, but we might be better off doing something else. So is this person willing to surface this part of themselves that doesn't put them in the best light, that maybe is a bit of a narrative break or a vibe shift from how they might want to be seen? That's where a lot of the wisdom is, and that's where a lot of the resistance to change lives. So the more this person is willing to go there and surface and be surprised by these aspects of themselves that maybe don't see the light of day too often, that goes a long way toward success. Someone who's looking for tools and hacks and quick ways to change, but isn't really looking to do that internal change, that's not going to work. That's been more of a push rather than a pull. I firmly believe that all external change seen in terms of behavior starts with internal change in terms of beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, and again, everything that you just said also, those changes in relationships, they follow the same rules. Those changes in our romantic relationships, in our personal endeavors, they all follow the same rules. And that's, again, what this podcast is all about. Why I say change made easy. And so why I don't say relationships or entrepreneurship or anything. It's like change, in my opinion, is at the root of everything. If we continue to peel back the onion enough times for whatever it is, the thing that we want, what we get in the center is change. Something about, if I want something, then something about what I'm doing has to change. If I don't have that thing already, right? Just by definition, my current actions are not getting me the thing. So I have to change something about that. But you said something there that I want to double click on for a second. And that's that everything that we're doing is serving us in some way. So isn't that then an argument against change? Isn't that the antithesis of what we're doing here? And how is it that negative things are serving me? Like, I'm smoking cigarettes, or I'm self-sabotaging. Like you said, I know I'm supposed to be working out, but every day I snooze my alarm and I watch more TV, and like I'm beating myself up about it. Like, but I'm staying stuck in those cycles. That doesn't feel like it's serving me.
Mhm. I'm very literal in that everything we do has a purpose. Otherwise, why would we be doing it? And with something, let's say like smoking, it's clear to see the downsides of that, especially long term. I don't think there's a lot of people would say smoking is good for you in terms of health, but in the very short term, it can represent a break. right? In a classic smoking break. When at my first job, I was always jealous because the people who smoked got twice as many breaks. It's like, maybe I'll take up smoking. I want some more breaks. The relaxing aspect of it, both chemically as well as a ritual. All rituals have some purpose, and smoking is like, okay, we're talking about taking the breath. You're forced to take a breath when you smoke a cigarette. So just the acknowledgement that there are good things that we are getting out of this thing that's, quote, not positive or self-sabotaging, allows us to be in relationship with it and look at the behavior more objectively rather than judgmentally. The judgmental perspective, in my experience, leads to these all or nothing approaches. The classic cold turkey, which these tend to be fragile because the underlying architecture internally hasn't actually shifted. It's trying to overcome a psychological, in this case, a chemical dependency with just pure willpower, which is a difficult approach. But instead, thinking about, well, what are we trying to get from this? Say, well, I'm stressed. I'd like a break. Well, what are some other things that I could do to reduce stress, to create ritual, to create breaks in my life? And let's try those as an experiment and see how they feel. I'm sure you're probably more up to speed on this stuff than I am, Paul, but my impression is that habit breaking is challenging. It's much better to habit replace. So once we understand the purpose that this behavior we want to change is serving, we could potentially find better, more aligned ways to satisfy that craving.
Yeah, so good. I agree 100% in the concept of like if it didn't serve a purpose, we wouldn't be doing it. Even when usually it's just that the reality is the short term is beneficial and the long term is net negative, but we have silly unevolved brains that don't look that far into the future, and that gets us into pretty much every issue that we face can be boiled down to that specific thing. Because if not, I'm curious and I'm thinking about the future, and I'm not snapping at my spouse because I'm looking at the long term view. But in the moment, I'm defensive and I'm angry, and then that everything spins out from there, which goes back to where we started, which was that slowing down thing. That's why I brought that up, because it's such a powerful thing to do, is just slow down. It gives us that chance to catch up with what I call the logical brain and the emotional brain. And we make so many decisions before we actually get to think it through. And in hindsight, we probably know like cigarette's bad for us, but I've already smoked a cigarette, and I'm like, yeah, I'll quit tomorrow. So I'm right there with you, and it's very very much aligned, everything that you're talking about, and you both have learned through your practice and lived experience through yourself. It's what all the science shows, which is why this is so interesting to me. You mentioned, though, the architecture of change, right? And you said that if we kind of try to get out ahead of it too fast before we've built the right architecture internally or to begin with, that is setting us up maybe to regress eventually in the future. Could you expand on that a little bit? I like that analogy, and I think I understand where you're going, but I would love for you to kind of go a little deeper in that.
Sure. Maybe we ground it in an example. Is there an example that comes to mind for you?
So, well, the way I heard it when you said it is kind of like, right, I'll use fitness as an example. Everyone knows that I use that as the classic example, because it's something I think everyone has struggled with at least at one point in their life, where it's like, if I'm hearing it or understanding it correctly, it's like I decide I'm over this not being in shape thing. I know it's important. I want to get this handled. I'm going to sign up for the gym and I'm going to go 5 times this week. and like I shoot myself out of a cannon to start going, but there's something missing. Like I have the theoretical habit of the thing that I quote unquote need to do. I know what should be done, air quotes for those listening, but there's something missing that's going to hold that thing in place and stop it from crystallizing in the foundation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we're on the same page now. So the way that I think about this is anything that I want to change, I try to move upstream. So rather than focusing on the moment itself, imagine, like a river, I'm literally going further up the river to the source where the water is coming from and trying to steer things in the direction that I want before the moment that I need to make this disciplined choice to go to the gym, let's say. So this is a bit more of a Eastern approach rather than the Western approach, a bit more bottom up, emergent. I'm thinking about, we'll use the gym example. In this hypothetical universe where I go to the gym regularly, what else is true? What are the things that might be contributing to me going to the gym? I think of these as conditions. If going to the gym is conditional on something that happened before, what are those things that happened before? Well, I have a gym that I like. I have someone that I'm accountable to that I work out with regularly. I have a workout plan that I can follow when I get there. I have time set aside in my day to go to the gym. It's close to me. I have some reinforcement. Like I can list out hundreds of things here, but there's all things that increase my chances when it comes time of doing the thing. And once you realize that the future is still uncertain and has not occurred, this is a bit of the poker mindset. I can create those conditions. I can shift the odds of the things that I want happening to happen. So, before I would sit down at a poker table, there's a lot of luck that happens in poker, but I know there were things that I could do that would make those lucky things more likely to benefit me rather than another player. And this is the skill of being lucky, is how do you create the conditions for luck to find you? And when you get lucky, how do you make the most of those circumstances? So this is a bit different from just pure planning. It's actually visualizing and predicting. I think, we see this with LLMs, and if we trace back history of brains and why we have all of this energy going to these things inside of our skulls is to predict what's going to happen. So we can use that energy to our advantage in saying, hey, what is the outcome that I want? What are the things that would increase the odds of the outcome happening? Okay, which of those things are in my control? Okay, let's do that. So I try to, as best I can, not leave whether I go to the gym or not up to chance. I've already thought through what are the things that are going to make it very likely that I go to the gym today, and have done those.
Yeah, such an interesting perspective that of taking luck but making it controllable, or being open to luck being, while it's not obviously completely in our hands, something that it sounds like we can influence with the proper intent.
Yeah, this applies to all decision making as well, to our earlier thread. One of my favorite Jedi tricks in a session when someone is making a decision is I'll have them calibrate with a number. So what is the percentage chance in this example that you think you will go to the gym? And people tend to overestimate this. I get like 90% a lot. And I was like, okay, well, let's bet on that. My $10 to your $90. Or I'll use different things like that to get them down a little bit. So, okay, maybe the real percentage is 70%. And then it's okay, well, let's say that the real number, the actual Vegas odds of you going to the gym tomorrow are 50%. What changed that? It's like, well, maybe I drank, maybe I got a bad night of sleep, maybe I didn't tell anyone I was going to the gym, maybe I have a real busy morning and I don't have any time set aside, all these little factors. It's okay. Which of those factors can we make sure, make sure these failure modes don't occur? Okay, let's imagine it's 90%. All right, my partner or my best friend, hey, we're going to meet at the gym and we have a specific program together. And if I don't show up, I owe him $100, or I have to give $100 to my least favorite charity, or any number of things. It's not that you can't go to the gym. It's that you haven't raised the stakes and created the conditions to the extent that going to the gym is a no-brainer inevitability. Right? There's a level of stake and there's a level of just stacking all the odds in your favor that it's going to happen. And that's an amazing thing, because then it's just, well, how badly do you want this to happen? Because you can create the levers. And so that's something that I try to emphasize often is, making your decisions an active process. Seek out the information that would change your mind. If you want something to happen, make those conditions happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like just nodding my head so much it's about to fall off my shoulders because we're speaking the same language. It's literally anyone listening knows in the intro to every episode I say my whole goal is to make change so easy it can't not happen. And I think that this is the whole thing. This is where so many people get tripped up, is just they're just like, well, I just have to do it. I just have to want it more. I have to, willpower, grit, motivation, whatever of those words that you want to use. And it's just like, and because I don't have that thing, then I can't do it. Where I think if I'm understanding, as you're saying, Chris, it's two pronged. One is reducing the friction to the thing that's going to make you not want to do it, but then also stacking the deck, so to speak, for the reasons to and the benefits from doing it. And so both of those things literally tip the scales to, now I'm taking away reasons or things that could get in my way, and then I'm increasing the benefit or the outcome that I could get from this thing by, like, we get, like you said, it's like I'm not just going to the gym, I'm working out with a friend, and I'm also winning a bet, and I'm also working towards my whatever goal for my health insurance to get 100 workouts in, and I get a rebate or something like that. But because if I see those two as levers, like you said, then I have the choice to pull them. And so the action then becomes using these tactics or these levers. And if I don't, that's an active choice that I'm making. And it's nothing is right or wrong, but like I have to admit that I'm leaving money on the table, that I'm not acting, and that maybe that means I'm not as aligned with this goal as I once thought I was. Am I on the right path?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll address those in turn. First, in action is a decision. Once you realize there are things you can do to change your behavior, choosing not to put those conditions in place, perhaps we go back, is a signal that maybe this goal isn't all that important to you. And I have a lot of conversations around priorities and people saying something's important to them. When it's like, oh, my family is my top most important thing in my life. Okay, so why are you working 100 hours a week and not having dinner with your family? And I said it's not that one is right and another is wrong, but if you say one thing is a priority, your schedule, your actions should reflect that. If I could distill down my thesis on behavior change to one sentence, it's make the things you want to do easier to do, and make the things you don't want to do, or the things you want to do less, harder to do. There's a lot of wisdom that's compressed into that. And on the default, I just need more motivation, willpower, etc. I'm a bit of an extreme contrarian on this side, is that I believe I have no free will and I believe I have no willpower. So these are just useful beliefs to have. If I believe that I don't have much control over my decisions on what I do in the moment, well, I pay a lot of attention to what that moment looks like because so much is out of my control. And that encourages me to think upstream rather than depending on something like willpower, discipline that might not be there when I need it the most.
Yeah, it's such a cool way to think about this, and it points, I think, to your success in so many ways. It's almost like you said it's an extreme take, right? It's like that's probably not actually the case. You do have some say, but it's like if I assume that I will have no willpower, how can I build this in such a way that since I have no willpower, since I have no motivation, it still gets done anyway? And I think that doing that, it builds in fail safes to make sure that you might have willpower some days, but some days you won't. Some days you're busy and you get off 8 calls and you still have this. So I think that's such an impactful thought experiment for those listening. Like when you're thinking about your goals, or you're thinking about building your day, you're right. It's perfectly contrarian. Rather than relying on those things, like what if you never had motivation again? What if you never had willpower again? How could you get this done without all of that stuff?
It's a key differentiator to the second part of your earlier question about how high performers set themselves apart. It's this not calibrating to average. It's, am I playing to win or playing not to lose? So, someone who's playing to win does everything that's in their power to win. And so much of the game is played before the teams even take the field.
That's so good. Am I playing to win or playing not to lose? I appreciate that so much, Chris. I mean, I love this conversation. I love all of our talks. I knew this would be a good one. I'm going to leave you with the same two questions I ask all of my guests. And the first question is simply, or maybe not simply, but what is the change that you want to see in the world?
I mean, there's so many directions that I could go with this. I would choose to, double down on something we've talked about rather than risking opening up a new can of worms. One that comes to mind is I would love for everyone, ourselves included, to speak more kindly to ourselves and to each other. The saying, we tell ourselves things that we would never tolerate from our worst enemies, I think can be very true. And a lot of our self-image and beliefs about ourselves and what's possible for us, come downstream from these conversations that we're continuing to have with ourselves, consciously, subconsciously, every breath and every moment. So, that would be, my wish that I think would have many ripples is for us to be kind and to amplify the things that we do that are aligned, that do, lead to better outcomes, and to be more understanding and more forgiving when we do make those missteps, knowing that embedded in every misstep is a lesson. So, being kind allows us to avoid needing to pay for that lesson multiple times. And that's what the being hard on ourselves is just continually paying tuition on lessons that, we've already had.
Love that. And I think you're right that the ripple effect is massive just from some simple self kindness. And it feels better. So I think that that's a good place to start.
And
My,
the subject, yeah, sorry, you brought up a good point, is, and the subjective experience of living matters.
yeah.
It's very easy to get overly instrumental around productivity and performance, that we are just these machines that you need to tweak our gears and outcome productivity and results out the other side. And I really do think, having more fun and joy in life is something that's worth having independent of outcomes. But if we're having a joyful, fun life, we're also more likely to have better outcomes. It's a win-win, which is hard to come by.
Yeah, I mean it's all upside, no downside. So I love that, and I say to clients all the time, it's like if being hard on yourself worked, it would have worked already, right? Like if you could shame yourself into a better life, the world would be a very different place. So I don't think that that route works, and I think that some kindness goes a long way. My last question for you, Chris, if you had one action step that you can leave listeners with right now today, as soon as this episode ends, as soon as they take their headphones out, to start making any change they're trying to make in their life just a little bit easier. It can be something we already talked about or something brand new. What's one action they can take today?
One thing that you can practice at the 1 second level and really develop a muscle for is predicting, putting a number on what you think is going to happen and seeing what new information will affect that number. And that'll help you identify the conditions that are more likely to lead to the outcomes that you're looking for. I find that starting with that number, that you have a baseline and seeing what makes the number go up or what makes the number go down, it helps bring ideas. And ideas lead to actions and experimentation. And the great thing about experiments is that you can't fail. The worst thing that happens is you have unexpected results. Best thing that happens is you learn something that works and you double down. So that would be the thing I would leave you with, is to put a number on things.
Amazing. I love that. It's a new one I've never heard before, and I think that's super actionable and again a great thought experiment for people. I appreciate this so much, Chris. I appreciate you being here again. I love you. I love all of our conversations. I love getting to chat with you. I'm going to have links for your blog in the show notes. Is there anything specifically that I can send people to, or anywhere that anything you're doing that you're excited about, or anything that you want to talk about or promote?
If you'd like to learn more about me, my company, my work can be found at forcingfunction.com. I would encourage you, if anything we said today resonated, to check out some of the writing there. I have some good articles on these topics. And if it did, I would also love to hear from you. I always hope these conversations are a gateway into an individual one-on-one conversation. So if something we said today was interesting, please feel free to email me directly, chris@forcingfunction.com.
Amazing, Chris. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I'll put links to all of that in the show notes. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks, Paul.
Before you go, I want to talk to you. Literally. For the first time ever in over 12 years as a coach and 4 years doing this podcast, I'm opening up my schedule to help listeners like you for free. I'm offering a free coaching session to you as a thank you for supporting this show. I help people create their healthy habits and happy lives and create positive change around their health, wealth, and relationships. Whatever you're working on, mind, body, and soul, we can cover it all. If you're struggling, I want to help you build a plan to get through it and past it. So go into the show notes and click the link that says book a free call today. I don't know how long I'll be able to keep doing this, and my schedule will fill up. So if you want to take advantage, make it happen ASAP.